Rogers TV.
Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Out of the Fog. I'm your host Laurabel. On tonight's episode we'll be talking about food security. It's something that we're all dealing with within this province. We'll be talking with Food First NL CEO Joshua Smee. We'll also have Kathryn Atkin from Connection for Seniors and Nicolas Keough from MUNSU, who will be talking about how food security is affecting each of these populations. And we'll be right back. Welcome back, everyone. I'm now joined by Josh Smee, who is CEO of Food First NL. Josh, thank you for joining me for such an important conversation.
Thanks for having me.
So a lot of our viewers might not know what Food First NL is. So before we get into what's going on in terms of food security, do you mind giving us some recap as to what your organization does?
Absolutely. So we're a provincial nonprofit organization, and top level, we work to ensure that every Newfoundlander and Labradorian has access to adequate amounts of healthy, affordable, nutritious food. And that can mean a lot of different things. A lot of what we do is connecting people to each other. So there's lots of people in this province who work on food in some way. We connect them with each other. We advocate for policy change that would improve food security for people. We resource grassroots projects, and we have some social enterprises on the ground doing work in the food space.
Okay, so we've all noticed that food prices are going up due to inflation. What are you guys seeing in terms of people reaching out to you, and what kind of services are you now providing to support people?
Yeah, so the whole food world is being shaken right now by what's happened with food prices. So everyone's feeling that food price inflation has outpaced inflation writ large, right? So depending what you look at, some commodities and some basic groceries have gone up 10, 20, even 30%, and that's a huge impact on people's bottom lines. And so our organization now has a frontline service. We never used to. We used to be mostly in the background as this kind of network for community groups. But when the pandemic started, one thing that happened was we realized there was just nowhere to go for the information people needed. So if you needed to find out where was a food program near you, there was no website or anything. So we created a directory of all the food programs in the province. Then we realized, of course, people who needed that information didn't necessarily have access to the internet to get it. We added some phone access to it. And then we started getting a lot of calls from people whose issue was not that they couldn't find a food program, it was that the food programs that were available to them wouldn't work for them. So there's folks, for example, if you have any kind of dietary need, if you need to eat halal, or if you have a health-related dietary need like diabetes, for example, it's really difficult to access support through food programs. Like food banks can't always serve you. And if you need to access support more than once a month, you can be in real trouble, because most of the food bank network, you can only visit any food bank once a month. And so what we ended up creating was a service called the Community Food Helpline, which is supposed to be basically a backstop. So if you call and you've tried everything else, you've called your local food bank, maybe you visited them once that month, and you still need more support, you can call the helpline, and the helpline offers things like gift cards, some delivery service if that's the challenge for you, a whole range, and taxi supports to get people to places to access food. And so that service is really active. Demand has close to doubled in the last calendar year, to the point that it's a real strain, to be honest with you. The wait time now for getting a response from the helpline is in the weeks, because you have to leave a message, and then we have 500 people waiting for a callback now from the staff, and we're talking to food programs everywhere, and the story is the same. The level of need is just far beyond what the kind of food charity system is set up to handle.
Okay, so you guys are experiencing a greater demand than you initially
100%.
set up for. What are you seeing in terms of the age range? Is there a wide variety, or do you see typical group calling you?
Yeah, that's a good question. There's a few kind of bubbles of need within the community. We know, for example, single parent households are a huge part of the food insecurity landscape. So if you're, especially households led by single women, more than twice as likely to be food insecure than the sort of average in the population. And so we also know Newfoundland and Labrador has the highest rate of childhood food insecurity of any province. So
wow.
just around 25% of all kids in this province are food insecure. And so we get a ton of calls from families, particularly single parent families, who are really struggling to keep their kids fed. And I think that's true across the system, not just us. And then you do get a lot of calls from seniors who are often struggling. We saw through, particularly during the pandemic actually, when people were a bit more cut off from their kind of other supports that they might access, you know, friends and family bringing them meals or community programs where they were accessing food, they were relying more on emergency food. But one thing, especially now with food prices going up, for folks to know is, you know, food bank access is not limited to people who are, for example, on income support or, you know, relying on social services. There are many, many working folks. I'm sure lots of people listening to this show are in this position that don't know how they're going to make their food budget work. You know, people with 2 full-time jobs, if you're working anywhere near the minimum wage, it's just not possible to be food insecure or to be food secure. And so folks like that are also relying on food banks and meal programs and that whole relief infrastructure for sure.
So before the show started, you and I talked a little bit briefly as to how when we talk about food banks, for as long as I can remember, food banks have existed, but that wasn't always the system. So what are you guys kind of doing to kind of challenge that notion?
Yeah, and that's a good thing for people to remember is that food banking as a model is only a little bit older than I am. I'm 37 and food banks were started about the same time I was born, a few years before. Folks who remember being around in the early 80s, it was a pretty deep economic crisis at the time, and food banks were a response to that at the time were really meant to be temporary. In the same way that I think a lot of the things that we've put in place around COVID were meant to be temporary, and now, you know, there is always a challenge because once you create services, they become a part of the kind of social service infrastructure, right? And so yeah, we're 40 years on, and for a long time, that's been kind of the response. When we've known that people are going hungry, we've said, well, there are food charities out there, not just food banks, meal programs, all these kind of things. And I think it's really important to rethink that notion, to think about what's a more sustainable model going forward. We know, for example, from some research in the pandemic, that probably less than 1 in 7 or 1 in 8 of the people who could access food charity even ever do. Because there's so many barriers, right? Lots of people, they can't access these programs. They find it stigmatizing to go. Lots of reasons. And so I think we need to think out what's a different model. And so we're running a process called Rethinking Food Charity. So we spent the last year, we've been talking to food programs because they want to think about what a sustainable future is. Absolutely. We've also been talking to folks who use food programs and critically folks who can use them. So there's lots of folks who are, you know, living with low income but are not accessing food supports for lots of reasons. And so we've been talking to folks all year. And then this month, on the 26th, we're hosting a forum here in St. John's for folks involved in that world where we'll come with some initial ideas of what could be different and workshop them together, hear from some of the voices from across the country who are trying to do this work a little bit differently and redefine what food charity looks like. I think that's an important conversation for us to have as a community, is like where do these services fit and how do we get to a point where they're not needed anymore?
So for this Rethink workshop, who is allowed to basically participate and how do people get more information as to how they can participate with this program?
Yeah, so there's a website we have, foodfirstnl.ca/rethinking food charity. And it's really, the form is quite open. If you're doing work, this form is largely meant for folks who are doing work in this world in some way. So if you work with a food bank, a meal program, or with a government service that connects with those programs, and want to talk about the future of that work, please, we encourage you to join.
Thank you so much. So I do have one more question.
Absolutely.
If people wanted to say, people who do happen to have an excess and are in a position to support, how can they support your organization?
I think the most important thing is to put pressure on decision makers, right? So what we need right now is we need people to be advocating for the system changes that need to happen. So, you know, you could give me twice or 10 times the amount of budget for the emergency service we run, and it will not solve this problem. What will solve this problem is big picture system change around people's incomes. So that could be things like increasing the minimum wage, income support increases, ideally a basic income. We're having a lot of conversation around basic income right now. So the most effective thing to support our work is not to give us money, frankly, or it is to reach out to your MHA, to your MP, and make it clear that it's really unacceptable that we have such an incredibly high level of hunger and of food insecurity in the community, and that there are solutions that are on the table that we're not yet really picking up.
I want to thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to kind of sit down and talk to me about such an important topic. It's really been a pleasure.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Really appreciate the invitation.
And we will be back.
For sure.
And we'll be back, everyone. Welcome back, everyone. I'm now joined by Kathryn Atkin, who is the board chair for Connections for Seniors. Kathryn, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
So we're having a very important conversation about food security. But before we delve into what that is like for the community your group serves, do you mind letting people know a little bit about what Connections for Seniors is?
Connections for Seniors is a not-for-profit organization which was established in 2018. Its goal is to promote dignity and self-efficacy, but we help older adults navigate all the complex systems that are out there which link to health, housing, legal and financial matters, which all impact their quality of life. In the 4 short years that we've been in existence, and our 2 founders, Mohammed Abdallah and Amanda Devlin, have worked hard to ensure that we can do the best we can, and our caseload has tripled and quadrupled from 2018 to today. It's actually scary.
Oh my God. So you guys have been around for only 4 short years, but since basically Snowmageddon, things have basically ramped up for you guys. And now with inflation and food security proving to be more of an issue, what are you guys finding in terms of the people you serve?
Well, like you said, in Snowmageddon, the roof lifted off a little bit, and then the pandemic came, which totally ripped the roof off. And we just we had to work to develop a program to meet the food insecurity needs, which we were beginning to see. We do have well-established partnerships with the local food banks. We work with volunteers who go out to pick up the food hampers to deliver to our clients. We're averaging over the last year about 120 seniors a month. Wow. And that's nowhere near what we could be doing, but manpower and volunteer power is just not there to achieve it. In 2021, we delivered 1,420 food hampers to seniors in the community through the food banks. And since 2020, we've delivered 2,500 food hampers. And that's only one part of it. In addition, through partnerships with other organizations like Manuel's River and Stella Circle, Hungry Heart, we've provided 20,000 hot meals to seniors in the community. And sadly, our biggest program through Manuel's River has now ended because we just don't have the funding for it. All the funding was donated through Rotary clubs, significant amount through Rotary clubs, and a significant amount from United Way. However, that funding has ended and we can't seem to find another source. So seniors are entitled to 1 full hamper and 1 emergency hamper per month. That's it.
That's it.
And that's often not enough. So we maintain a small community food bank within our own premises, which we use to top up for seniors when we need to. But even though the food banks are really helpful, seniors are not getting the nutritional meals that they need for their health, for just the basic needs, because through mobility they can't cook for themselves. Through other issues, complex health needs, they just don't have the ability to get, a meal cooked. And the adage of tea and toast is pretty much true out through there now. They don't often receive food that is nutritious, and that was what we were aiming to do through the hot meal program, where they did receive a hot, nutritious meal, and it was tailored to diabetics and low salt and all those issues. But we're working hard to develop initiatives that are still hoping to work on this area. Our other biggest barrier is transportation. We use volunteers and our own vehicle and our staff to move the food around. We provide transportation to seniors to go grocery shopping for those who can, who have no other means. We provide transportation to get the food from the food banks to them, and we help them go to appointments. Unfortunately, we have no funding for the transportation program.
Oh, wow.
So it's having to come out of other areas, and we have made a pitch to government and asked for some help, and we hope that Department of CSSD will come out and help us, because we are the only organization doing that right now. Many of the seniors that we serve, many of the seniors in the community are on fixed incomes.
Yeah.
There's no index linking. They're on basic OAS. Some of them don't have CPP. A spouse dies, they're left with one income, and they can't maintain their own homes. So it becomes a choice between, do I eat this week? Do I buy my meds? Do I put the heating on? And as we're coming up to winter and fuel is skyrocketing, and if you've been in the supermarket lately, food is skyrocketing.
Absolutely.
It's becoming ever more crucial, and we're very worried about what the winter months are going to bring to us.
So we've talked a lot about this, so this is very touching and honestly truly heartbreaking when we think about this. And so when you're serving these communities, are you serving the entire province, or are you relegated to a particular area that you can service right now?
Currently, we're serving the Northeast Avalon. We have gone down as far as the Southern Shore when we get referrals. We go up to Conception Bay South, Paradise, into Torbay. It's all through the referral process, either by the senior themselves or by some agency that identifies them.
So then that now also leaves the rest of the province we do have seniors who are living out around the Bay who do not have access but are still facing these same critical issues as well.
Absolutely, because pre-pandemic, I have a mom that lives out in a community around the Bay, and pre-pandemic, they all helped each other and took each other to the grocery store, and they had community meals. But then the pandemic came, which isolated everybody. The rides stopped being given, the community meals stopped, and a lot of it hasn't come back.
Wow.
So it's left a big hole, and I think that food insecurity has become a major issue, largely unseen prior to the pandemic, but I think it's a major issue around the province right now. Community gardens are helping, but it's not helping the seniors. Seniors outside the community, they won't go to food banks. They're too embarrassed. Or the food banks are too far away from them, or they don't exist in their communities.
So this is clearly a bigger topic than we can fit in just this little time we have with you here, and I know this is something that your organization is going to continue to work on. If there was one thing you wanted to leave our viewers or leaders with before we let you go, what would you want them to know?
We need help. We are a not-for-profit organization. Everything that we have stays within the organization, and to run the many programs that we have, food is only one piece of it. We have many other programs that we need to address, like housing. That's a whole other evening we could spend, but we need help. We will take donations, which can be dropped off at the office on Prince Wales Street, or on Pennywell Road rather, or you can go to our website and donate there. We would take any canned or dry goods that you would like to donate to us. That would be absolutely wonderful, because it would help us top up what we do. And we need volunteers. We need daytime delivery drivers, newly retired, people with time on their hands, to go out to help the seniors who need to be helped, either by dropping off food or going shopping for them or picking up things that need to be picked up. That would be awesome.
Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you.
And we'll be right back, everybody. And I'm now joined by Nicolas Keough, MUNSU Engineering Representative. Nicolas, thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
So we're talking about food security, and one thing that people sometimes forget is what that's like when it comes to students. So recently in the news, MUN announced that their food bank was closing. So before we get into what all that has to do, what was that like as a student initially to hear the food bank is closing?
Absolutely. It was really, really scary. personally, I don't use the food bank, but I know so many students do, and the numbers have been increasing, which is why the food bank closed. There's a definite increase in demand. There's a lot of students struggling to pay for food, and I think that that is really felt with students, and it was really scary for a lot of students when food banks did close.
So as we talk a little bit about this, for MUNSU, how have you guys been able to support your student population when it comes to things like food security?
Absolutely. So in MUNSU, we advocate for all students, and one of the pressing issues right now is high tuition. So tuition has increased by over 150% for local students and 97% for international students in the past year. And we've noticed that there's been a 19.1% decline in enrollment this year for first-year students. So a lot of students are not able to pay for school, and even those that are struggling to pay for other things like food. So the MUN Food Bank, we've noticed that MUN has announced that there has been a doubling and almost a tripling of the number of clients in the food bank, which is not normal. Especially this year, it's been way worse than normal, but it has been on an increase since COVID happened. Since 2019, there's been an extreme increase. And so what we have done is tried to ask the government and ask the administration to financially support students, and also to look at reducing tuition, look at different things to reduce tuition, especially for international students who might not be able to pay expenses. You know, they pay a lot more for tuition than local students, and they have to pay for food, which obviously can be a huge burden. And I think that it's really important that the government helps us out.
So as of right now, can you state whether the MUN Food Bank is open or closed, and if people are able to use it?
So it is open right now, but it closed for a few days at the end of last month, and now it's reopened with smaller food hamper sizes. So although it's open, it's not at its optimal state, and we do wish that the food hampers could go back to the normal sizes.
So when you say it's at a smaller size, what would someone say if I had to avail of the food bank? What could I expect to receive in a food hamper?
You can expect to receive essentials. So I'm not sure exactly what that would look like, but definitely essential food items. But it's now down to more bare bone essentials because they have less money coming in and food prices are higher.
So how was the food bank sustained before? Was that something like students were making donations, other students were making donations to the food bank, or was that through MUNSU and MUN's administration buying food for the food bank?
Yeah, so MUN definitely did support the food bank financially, and there has been a lot of issue with that, of course, but students have been helping as well, but we definitely need a lot of administrative support.
Okay, so let's say to the viewers who are watching right now, if they said, hey, how can I support? Because we know students are working on a very fixed income, and we do have international students who now might be paying higher fees, who are also working on an even more fixed income without having community support. What can we do as a community to support students and support the food bank?
So immediately we can donate to the food bank. We can contact MUN and contact MUNSU and the food bank itself. So that's definitely an option, but I think a larger issue is food insecurity in general. Food banks were initially intended to be a Band-Aid solution to a larger problem of income inequality, and I think that it's definitely important to look at these causes and try to solve the root of the issue. I definitely think also it's important for everyone to advocate for more accessible tuition fees. I think it's very, very obvious the impact that this is having on students, and also the impact that it's having on the food bank. So I definitely think that anyone who wants to get involved can definitely contact us to help us support students in getting tuition fees reduced as well.
Okay, so if you have a plea for, let's say tomorrow, if someone could snap their fingers and support both students and the food bank, what would you like? And if you could rank for individual support, administrative support, and provincial support, what would that look like for you?
So it's hard to rank because I think that an immediate solution is not necessarily the best solution. And while it might help people right away, which is super important, of course, it won't help long term. So I definitely think that there needs to be all three. There needs to be administrative support, provincial government support, and individual support to get the food bank up and running right now, to get it back to what it normally is. But also we need government and we need administration to be looking at student struggles and their issues, and we need support from administration, we need more support from the government, and we need more funding for education in general.
So when we talk about food banks, we know that's usually just like haphazard meals put together. Do you know of any student supports that are available that provide hot meals to students currently?
Yeah, so there are meal plans at MUN, which are available for some students if they live on campus, if they live in certain residences, so not on Burton's Pond residence. But there are a lot of students that live at home, or a lot of students that live by themselves in an apartment that then can't avail of those resources. So it's definitely really important to have the food bank as well.
So there's a large student population that isn't served by the meal plans and the hot meals available at MUN who do have to avail of the MUN food bank. Have you guys noticed any trends in terms of who you guys are seeing coming into the food bank by chance?
I don't work directly with the food bank, but I do know that a lot of international students have been feeling a lot of issues financially. I've seen a lot of posts on Facebook groups that MUN students have where students are just pleading for help with finances, with housing, with food, and I just think it's really unfortunate.
So we talked a little bit about, we mentioned housing and all the other insecurities when it comes to financial insecurities and inflation. If you had one thing you wanted to make sure people understood about the student struggle, what would you want them to know?
I would want them to know that it is extremely difficult being a student, especially in this time. We're facing inflation every single year, and also we know that we need to finish our degree to be able to do what we want with our careers. And I think we're in a really tough position right now, and especially international students and low-income students are really feeling the brunt of that. And you can see that by the decrease in enrollment this year. I think it's really sad.
Well, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to sit with me and talk about such an important topic.
Oh, thank you.
And we'll be right back, everybody. I want to give a very special thank you to all my guests for joining me today to talk about a very important issue about food security. If you're experiencing food security issues and you need help, please do not hesitate to reach out to any of your local community services. They will be there to help you in your time of need. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.
This program is brought to you by Ignite TV. Now you're in command. Visit Rogers.com for more details.
If you have a comment about this program, we'd love to hear it. Email or call us, or send us your feedback through social media.
From coast to coast, all across Canada, there's something very special going on. It's time to show your support. Time to spread the word. Time to demonstrate your commitment to safe and sober driving. Join thousands of Canadians and tie a ribbon on something or someone you love. And take the time to have a real conversation about impaired driving. MAD Project Red Ribbon. Tie it, wear it, show it, share it, live it. Find out more at mad.ca.